There are few things better than a villain who really makes your skin crawl. One such thing is a villain whose skin you want to crawl all over, baby. That's got to be up there for one of Luca's stupidest intros, and I have a lot of stupid intros. That being said, today we're talking about one of the most professional haters of all time, Dio Brando. So I welcome you to JoJo But With Cooties Part 2, Yay Edition. And as always, we start with, who is Dio Brando? I want to start our introduction to Dio by talking about something I personally find very important, and it's the fact that he establishes how fickle genetics are. Whatever you might think about Dio Brando, can't deny that he's a little bit of a looker. Whatever you might think about Dario Brando, you can't deny that he looks like you gave a blind 4-year-old child a crayon, told him to draw Kratos from memory, and then shoved that picture in an air fryer. But hey, so it goes. He's also one of the most iconic anime villains of all time, and for good reason. It's because Araki bases him off the psycho killer, serial killer trope, in particular FBI profiling, and he made him so damn charismatic. These two things work in tandem so well, A, because yes, the FBI profiling of serial killers often finds that they are somehow weirdly charismatic, but also the fact that people have a morbid curiosity. So when you see a villain that's almost as psycho as people in real life, you kind of want to see what they do. Now, he's a manipulator more than anything, which is incredibly based. Yes, he's overtly powerful, but he's not even the strongest villain we've seen in JoJo's. Most of his power comes from manipulating others, and he does some super, and I mean super, he goes on a generational run of doing sus things within like 4 chapters. We'll talk about this more in a sec, but you know that picture of a flaming horse that usually denotes like a generational run of something? This man does things so vile, so devious, that you cannot do anything but sit back and say, damn. He's kind of him. He's also a perfect foil to Jonathan and the Joestar lineage. I mean, even just by design, you see dark and light, weirdly, but mostly because Jonathan is noble and, how do I put this, extremely boring. Dio is not noble and extremely fun. He puts us in this interesting position where the protagonist whom we're supposed to root for, yeah, we root for because he's gentlemanly and noble. And while Jonathan is liked, you can't deny that he has the personality of a wet rag. Dio, on the other hand, you can't look away when he's on screen, A, because of his sexy jawline, and B, because he's creating a dumpster fire no matter where he goes. It's so based. And he's also a sommelier. And I include this because of his characterization. If he wasn't as evil as he was, he would be the type of character that you look at and you're like, damn, this guy is so classy, pretentious, intelligent, charming, charismatic. I want to be just like him. And then you see what he does and you're like, maybe not. But let me just get one thing straight with you. You like Dio because he's an interesting villain. I like Dio because he's relatable. And to wrap things up for the introduction, he is a sexy vampire pre the Twilight era. He basically established the entire genre. He has a very strong meme game, as you know, and an even stronger boob game. And with that being said, we can move on to, what has Dio done? Whether you've seen JoJo's or not, you might know Dio as an incredibly evil character. So you might be asking yourself, why is Dio so evil? Well, he was born in London. I'm just kidding. I would never ethnically stereotype like that. But it is important that he was born in London because he does use knives as his primary weapons. In fact, he even gets stabbed in the head by Jonathan. All I'm saying is that Araki was a pioneer when writing stereotypes in manga. My guy, I like your style. He also poisons his father, and I get it, King. He was an abusive alcoholic. He then kicks a dog in the jaw and then subsequently burns it alive. That was one of the most chilling, weirdest things to see if you read JoJo for the first time without knowing anything about Dio. Like, he kills a dog, man. You just don't see that often. And it's not even that he just kills the dog. He does it in like the most brutal way possible when he's like 17 years old. And then he also sexually assaults a girl. And at this point in making the slides, I was like, wow. This guy actually does some very heinous things. I can't believe that Araki even wrote him like this, because me personally, if I wrote a character like this or made jokes like this in a video, I would be afraid of getting canceled and being called out for being a psychopath. Not that I'm not. He then also kills his other dad and turns himself into a bisexual, living dead, immortal vampire who can not only bite people but inject his fingers into various parts of their bodies to make them feel pleasure or make them zombies. Now, this picture of Jonathan also should be used as a what the fuck did I just read meme, but hey, this adventure does seem pretty bizarre. If you haven't gotten the memo, I might just say that Dio pops off. He does some pretty cool things. He also ends up losing to his arch nemesis, typical villain things, but then he also uses his body for the rest of his immortal life. Now let me ask you, yes, keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer, but if you wake up in the body of your arch enemy, who's also your brother, what is the first thing you do? I'm not gonna say it, but I feel like it's a valid question to ask. It also begs the question because Dio is an egotistical narcissist. When you see a body like this, do you continue working out to make it even bigger? I mean, Jonathan's body is already so swollen, ripped, and oil-uppable. You never really know. Then he also persuades a priest to carry his will, and he knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, take a look at this picture, man. There's a reason Dio is shirtless, and Pucci's looking not at Dio's face. But this is what I'm saying, man. Dio is the ultimate manipulator. You never know what you're gonna get with him. One day he's manipulating this priest, the other day he's injecting his fingers into a woman, making her a zombie, and then watching her eat her own child without him commenting other than saying, wow, that was kind of disgusting. So it's really a toss-up for him. And then he beefs with an adoptive bloodline for generations. This is what I mean when I say ultimate hater. He fucking hates the Joestars. But more on that in a sec. He also then learns to fly, which I've always wondered, why don't more characters ever do this with their stands? And last but not least, my personal favorite thing, he gives Giorno Giovanna's mother a signed picture of himself, which begs the question, does he do this to every woman he sleeps with? And I mean, what is the level of narcissism that you need to have to do something like this? I mean, the man probably has like a mosaic of himself in his room, made up of like his idol, I don't even know, George Joestar. With that being said, I am going to go do something off screen. Oh man, you gotta love relatable content. Which segues us into what makes Dio great. Which segues us into the question, is he actually relatable? Nope, at least I hope not. Maybe to some of you, yes, but he's not written to be relatable, but he is understandable in some ways. He was born into an impoverished lifestyle and struggles with fate to change it. While he was born poor, he ends up living with the Joestar family, who are incredibly rich, so he asks the question, why am I fated to such a different life? Why was I born so differently? He holds some resentment to his adoptive father, George, because of the juxtaposition between his biological father, who was actually just a shit human being. And then he ends up having this mentality of, I need to take what I deserve, because I am Dio. All in all, if you were born into the situation that Dio was born into, you kind of might feel the same way. I mean, he loves his mother, who was the only good human being in his life for like nearly 20 years. And then he also has a goated voice actor. We never really give them enough recognition, but Dio would not be Dio without the same voice actor as Toji. I mean, this guy's got some pipes on him. I don't know his name, but let me show him some recognition. Takahito Koyasu. Goated. Your voice is heaven sent, man. Relatable content. You know what I'm saying? Now, from a narrative perspective, it's also great that he actually rejects humanity within the narrative, because Dio is unmistakably evil. He is evil for the reason of being evil. His motivation is nothing more than that, so you need a moment like this where he puts on his mask and he says, yeah, I'm actually not human. I'm worse than a serial killer. I'm worse than the psycho killers you guys have heard of. I am de facto the devil. He also always feels like a looming threat, especially in part 3, and his stand is by far the strongest stand we've seen up to that point. Even as a vampire, he feels like a looming threat. He's, in my opinion, much stronger than Jonathan. Jonathan just has the perfect counter to him. But in part 3, even the little few scenes we see of Dio, we ask ourselves, how the hell are they gonna beat him? The man can stop fucking time. He also has incredibly hyped moments in fights. While they're not my favorite and they're not the most memorable, you can't deny that they have aura, and he's evil, yet he respects the heroes. This is so based, man. This is a self-aware character. People in real life aren't even self-aware, and you give me a character that is self-aware? Come on, Rocky. Come on, man. He is that guy. He rejects his humanity. He's one of the strongest characters we've seen, yet he has the intelligence to say, damn, these guys can actually put a wrench in my plan. That makes for a good villain. Now, his charisma is what stands out in JoJo's. Listen to that again. His charisma stands out in a series where the characters stand out for being charismatic. This is what makes Dio so great. Like I said, our little London boy is not that relatable unless you grew up in Essex. But it's not that you want to root for him, it's that you love seeing him on screen. So ultimately the question is Dio the best JoJo's villain? Yes. If we are strictly talking about the cultural impact and being iconic. While I will say, I'm evil because I'm evil works for him as a villain, it's still not the best motivation ever, just from a writing and narrative perspective. He works within the narrative structure of JoJo's as this looming threat and almost this deity-like figure, but he's not someone that the audience gets emotionally attached to and understands their motivations from a human perspective. Pucci, as the villain in Part 6, due to Dio, that is fire writing, and that is much more interesting in my opinion. So the writing in Stone Ocean actually amplifies him as a villain. He's not just a bad guy, he's almost an evil narrative force, which works for Dio, but as a character in particular, it's okay. I'd say he's great, but he's not as good as Diego. I like him more than Diego, but from a writing perspective, in my opinion, he's not as good. So in conclusion, what can we say about Dio Brando? He is by far one of the most iconic villains in anime and manga. And I mean, the man knows it. He's pointing at it. He is over the top. He is charismatic. He has a sick design. He is hateable. He is lovable. He has everything you need in a villain to make you root for and against him. Unfortunately, he's English. Sorry, English viewers. I'm just kidding, guys. I love you. I mean, what am I even saying, man? I live in America. I can't speak. Anyway, he also has a take what he wants mentality. It is so base to see something like this in a villain. He has the fastest vile acts in shonen history. And it's not just that they're vile acts. They are perhaps some of the most vile acts in shonen history, which makes him so damn good. And I also want to say, he's a little bit of a mama's boy, which makes him even more relatable as a villain. But ultimately, above all else, he's Dio. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Dio PR team, anti-Dio PR team. Let me know what you think about Dio. Let me know what you think about my takes. Were they all L's? Were they all W's? How does he fit in within the narrative structure of JoJo's and compare it to the other villains? I think he's great, man. I can't help but love me a sexy character with a lot of aura and charisma. There's something about it calls out to me. If you have any suggestions for future videos, any character series to cover, games to play, real world things to do, let me know, because everything I do for that guy. Go check out other videos on the channel. We have a whole library of variety content. Stuff like this, stuff that is incredibly different. Go check out the links in the description, and until next time, I love you. Goodbye. Zawarudo!